That's right. Welcome in, everybody. It is some Nebraska men's basketball pregame coverage ahead of the Huskers and the Hawkeyes here in Iowa City. Austin Orman and Nick Sainer with you, previewing this near top 25 matchup between the Huskers and the Hawkeyes. Nebraska comes in at number 9 in the men's AP poll this continuing a trend of, I believe, 13 straight weeks now for Nebraska men's basketball being ranked inside the top 10. Rivalry match on tap tonight. Before we dive into that, I want to give a thank you to a couple of our sponsors making it possible for us to get out here, including Ben Bleicher with Professional Realty Group at BHHS Real Estate. Whether you're buying or selling a home or property, trust Ben's team with more than a decade of experience. Call Ben at 402-419-6309 today. Thanks as well to the Lincoln Airport, 93.7 The Tickets travel sponsor. They're now offering American Airlines flights later in 2026 to Phoenix, Dallas, and Chicago. Well, Nick, we made it. We're here in Iowa City ahead of this rivalry matchup between Nebraska and Iowa. Nebraska scuffling a little bit, lost 3 of 4. Iowa also scuffling, lost 2 in a row. Questionable one on the road at Maryland, and then at home against Purdue in dominant fashion from the Boilermakers, who are in action right now. Purdue and Michigan battling there near the top of the Big Ten standings. Let's start with the Nebraska angle. Important, I think, for Nebraska to go on the road, get that winning feeling again. Maybe their toughest game left, certainly in my opinion, one of their 2 toughest games remaining between this and UCLA. I expect the emotions to be high. It's a rivalry game, both teams looking to get back on beam.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Austin. Here's the deal. We were talking about it on our 4.5-hour journey from Lincoln to Iowa City earlier today, kind of guessing, what's the vibe and the audience going to feel like in Carver Hawkeye Arena. Still about an hour and 45 minutes, hour and 50 minutes away from tip-off. And I'll give you credit. You were calling it from the get-go that it was going to be a pretty fun environment. I was kind of on the lesser side. I didn't know how Iowa fans were going to react after they sell out Carver Hawkeye for the first time in Ben McCollum's tenure, last time out against 13th ranked Purdue at the time. And then they get boat raced and they get blown out of their own building by the Boilermakers. I didn't know what the reaction or the response was going to be from Hawkeyes fans, but we just got done with some dinner down in our hotel lobby area. And not only are there a lot of Iowa Hawkeye fans, there's a decent amount of Nebraska basketball fans as well. And so I think, as we've gotten closer to tip off, and this is the way usually things happen, I suppose, I do expect the atmosphere to be pretty intense tonight. It's a big matchup for not only Nebraska, but we'll talk about it throughout the course of the next, 30 minutes or so. Massive opportunity for Iowa here at home.
An Iowa team that struggled against ranked competition this year, and a Nebraska team, Nick, that has gone on the road and avoided upsets in a couple of difficult environments. Of course, Nebraska goes and beats Indiana with the biggest comeback of the season for the Huskers, or close to it. You go on the road, beat Ohio State. That's still, I think, a good win for Nebraska, even with Ohio State fading a little bit. They go to the Barn, where Minnesota had knocked off a pair of top 25 ranked teams at the time. Nebraska avoids that same fate. But this is Nebraska, Iowa. And I know that the rivalry conversation is probably overdone. I think people are on board with this being a game that means something. And that's why I expect a charged environment. A Nebraska team that would really like a win to get that winning feeling back, that I think needs to come out and match the desperation of an Iowa team that needs this win to play its way off the bubble. There's not a lot of impressive meat on the bones of Iowa's resume. Numbers, love them. They beat up on some quad 4 opponents early in the year. They're top 25 in KenPom, top 25 in net, and a bunch of other places as well. But I was really in search of that marquee win. And so for a Nebraska team that came off of a less than reassuring performance, certainly in the first 25 minutes of that game against Northwestern over the weekend, I think this is a great environment for Nebraska to walk into. A dangerous one, certainly. You're walking into, not a hornet's nest, but a hawk's nest, as they'll call it at Carver Hawkeye Arena. But I think this is an old enough, mature enough Nebraska team that understands the stakes for them, that understands, how desperate Iowa is going to be to pull off this upset, that knows how much the Iowa crowd would relish getting to beat Nebraska twice in 2 days, first on the road for the women at PBA, and then here at home on the men's side of things. I would be shocked if this isn't a charged environment, just because of how much this game can mean and can signify for both teams.
Yeah, you're right. I think let's start with the Nebraska angle here, because you mentioned it, right? This feels like, along with the UCLA matchup, maybe the the tougher of the two that are remaining on Nebraska's schedule. And obviously you wrap it up with a home matchup against this very same Iowa Hawkeyes team, I believe on March 8th on a Sunday afternoon at Pinnacle Bank Arena. But on top of that, I mean, I was telling you earlier, I mean, think about it this way. Nebraska has been starving to kind of feel like they're back into that 40 minutes of consistent basketball type of conversation. Mm-hmm. And we haven't really seen that consistently from them since December. We were going through earlier today, just think about, like, look back in hindsight's 2020, look back at how valuable and how real impressive the December slate was for Nebraska. You have a road win against Illinois, a home win against Michigan State, and now Wisconsin is a team that looks like they're going to be able to hold their own and maybe make some noise in March here as great guard squad's getting ready at the right time. You have a 30-point win over them as well. And then not to mention, I mean, you had a big rivalry win against Creighton in the same month. Like, there was a lot there in December that Nebraska can hang their hat on, but then we haven't necessarily seen that caliber consistently from the Huskers. Tonight in Iowa City here, Austin, if Nebraska is able to get this victory, you feel good about, and without counting your chickens before they hatch, you feel good about maybe getting a win at home against Penn State next time out. Then you feel good about maybe your opportunity against Maryland. Before you realize, or before you blink, you have a 4-game winning streak towards the back end of the season. And then you go on the West Coast trip. Who knows what happens? You stack up some of these wins, and Nebraska's right in the thick of that 2-seed conversation and firmly in a spot to hold a triple bye in the Big Ten Conference tournament.
Absolutely. A site that I don't bring up much, right? You think about your Ken Palms, your Torviks, your Evan Mias, but Eric Haslam, who's a Big Ten guy with his roots, has a rating when it comes to momentum. I don't know exactly who he judges. I don't know all the numbers, but I know he tweets it a lot. And Nebraska right now is 209th in the country in terms of momentum and 338th in the country in terms of consistency. And I've talked about this a little bit with the Evan Miyakawa numbers, where Nebraska's played its best against the best competition on its schedule. Nebraska on aggregate has underperformed, now in 3 of its last 4 games. A slight overachievement offensively, slight underachievement defensively against Rutgers, but the offense has underperformed per Haslam's numbers in the last 2 games. Defense has been up and down. If there's ever a time for a team to round into form, it's here in late February, getting into early March, into conference play. And I think, Nick, as we look back to Saturday, that was a good test Nebraska got from Northwestern. I know the conversation is going to be, should it have been that close? Nebraska didn't play its best game, and I agree with all of that. But I think that was a good attention-getting game for Nebraska, because this Iowa team is such that it is going to X's and O's you to death. We know Bennett Sturts. He's the headliner. But this is a Nebraska team that is prone to some inconsistencies. It's been that way all year. Mm-hmm. And clearly the record's better. They found ways to play through it. But if Nebraska comes out flat, if Nebraska comes out and gets down by double digits, that's a warning sign early, because Iowa, now makes you work for everything. The old challenge against Iowa was, can you score enough to keep up with them? In a lot of cases, that was a top 10, sometimes top 5 offense in the country under Fran McCaffrey. The metrics don't love Iowa as much, either offensively or defensively now. They're, I think, top 40 in both on Ken Palm, or a borderline there. But they are going to milk that shot clock. They are going to make you to defend, all 4 corners of the court for 27, 28 seconds before they get a shot up, if that's what it takes. And against a team like that has enough shot makers, that's good enough shooting the ball from 3, and has a maestro at point guard there in Bennett Sturts, Nebraska can't afford to let Iowa play from in front, just like in football. Just because of the way Iowa plays, it makes it more difficult to come back on the Hawkeyes. And conversely, look at Minnesota. Gophers jump out to a big lead. Iowa was game and made it interesting late, but they're just not built with how slow they play to consistently come back on teams like that. So if you're Nebraska, matching that energy to start the first half and throwing the first punch in the second half, I think ends up huge for Nebraska here today.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm interested to see how. I think this is another game where we see Nebraska's veteran pieces. Like, they're going to have to play a notable role, right? And they do every single game, just in terms of pace and controlling the moment, right? Like, I think back to Michigan, especially. I mean, that was the last true road test for these guys. And they did a really good job of not allowing the moment to get too big. Maybe towards the second half, we started to see them slip a little bit, but now it's what did they learn from that Michigan game that they can now transfer over to the Iowa game? And I say that because if you look at Iowa, you kind of opened with it, right? They've kind of had these ebbs and flows to where it's, okay, at the start of the year, Iowa's a top 25 team. This is going to be a tough road game for Nebraska. Who knows what happens at PBA in Lincoln? Maybe you split 1-1. It looks a lot like Illinois where Nebraska is able to steal one on the road, but who knows? Maybe Iowa can do the same on your home floor or vice versa, right? But then they go out and they lose a bad game against Maryland, and then they follow that up with a disappointing performance against Purdue. And I think that they are going to, as you look ahead at Iowa's schedule, and it's not necessarily as navigable.
It's not forgiving at all.
It's not forgiving. It's not as easy, simply put, as Nebraska's. They got to go to Madison, who's one of the hotter teams in the Big Ten Conference right now after Nebraska. Then they host Ohio State, Penn State. But then guess what? Going into the Big Ten tournament, you have to play two of the top three teams currently as it stands in the Big Ten Conference in Michigan and then on the road at Nebraska again. This is a point where I think if you're Ben McCollum, you're sitting there going, this is one we feel like maybe we can pick Nebraska off and steal a little bit of momentum to get back on the right track, because this thing probably feels a heck of a lot different for Iowa in year one of Ben McCollum. If they end up losing today at home, that's 3 in a row. And then if they can't get a win on the road in Madison, you look up and you're 18-9 after you were just 18-5 coming off of some big wins going into what you felt like was a pretty gettable game against Maryland. And so there's a lot for, I think, Iowa on the line tonight. It's a massive opportunity for the Hawkeyes, but then conversely, a huge opportunity and great chance for Nebraska to really go in and show that once again, they are a top 5 or top 10 team in the country, and they deserve that triple bye in the Big Ten Conference tournament.
This is a good challenge for Nebraska coming off a Northwestern game where Nebraska was very loose with the ball, a little careless, and dare I say the S word, soft at times, lazy potentially, aloof, not necessarily focused. Nick, this is an Iowa team that has the number 2 defensive turnover percentage in the entire conference in conference games only at 19.1%. We know that Nebraska takes really good care of the basketball, at least they did going into Northwestern. Nebraska now down at number 6 in the conference when it comes to offensive turnover rate, still a very good 13.8%. But Nebraska actually a couple points ahead of Iowa when it comes to turning teams over. Iowa is middle of the pack when it comes to taking care of the basketball on offense. But that's the lesson I think Nebraska needs to take away from Northwestern. If Nebraska, is going to be a little careless with the ball and Iowa's defense is going to play up and aggressive, Nebraska has to find ways to fight through that contact, to ball fake and back cut, or create, more opportunities, more possessions, by attacking the offensive glass like they did against the Wildcats. On the flip side of that, Iowa's so at taking care of the ball, and Nebraska is the best turnover forcing team in the conference right now, despite their style of play that wouldn't lead you to believe it. And so if Nebraska can pressure maybe Bennett Sturts, but I think more likely than not, the roll guys, get the ball out of Bennett Sturts' hand, make these guys that are less comfortable making decisions off the bounce, make those decisions. There might be some extra possessions for Nebraska to be had there.
Here's what I would ask with Austin, as we got 15 maybe 10 more minutes left in this conversation here. Who's the key for Nebraska? We can put a Nebraska focus on this because it's not that we necessarily disagree. I think we might just put them in reorder them or different orders of importance. Who's your key tonight? Because for me it's a guy, obviously Price is the story, right? Returning home. But trying to dig a little bit deeper, I think Jamarcus Lawrence, who more than likely will get matched up most of the time on Sturts, I think is matter. Maybe Jamarcus defensive-wise. Sam Hoiberg, like you said, and like we agree, is going to get his cracks at him. Who's the guy for you, though, that Nebraska needs to maybe play a bigger role than maybe what we've seen the last couple of games?
I think Jamarcus is a great pick. He's played pretty well against Iowa at times before, so I'm here for that one. Rink Mast having a good game after 6 turnovers against Northwestern. He's always key for Nebraska, but I think this could be a Braden Frager game in a lot of ways. I think that he's going to get a lot of the assignment on a guy like Tavion Banks, who's been pretty good offensively. all things considered, for Iowa with 24 starts in the 25 games played. Similar size at 6'7" and in 215. I think Frager is going to be matched up on him, and I think the edge, Nick, right? Frager will get in, around that U16 mark, whether Nebraska's going great or going a little bit poorly. This is a guy that we've heard, grew up, breathing Nebraska basketball, going to games, rooting for this program. And he's young enough to where he remembers the Big Ten era a lot more than he does the Big 12 era in a lot of ways. And so I think Braden Frager is a guy that, alongside the Price Sanford homecoming storyline, I think Frager, having some venom, some animosity maybe for this Iowa program is something that Nebraska needs. Can Braden Frager be Nebraska's first Big Ten villain, right? You can't hate Casey. You can't hate Siobhan Shields. You can dislike Teran Petaway, but he wasn't, like that. I think Braden Frager has a chance, to be Nebraska's first real Big Ten villain if he continues to play well, take care of business, and be the emotional spark that he is. And where better to prove that than by helping, lift your team to a victory on the road against still probably their biggest overall rival.
You're absolutely right. And I feel like now through the ankle and the injury and stuff, right, I feel like it's a layup to say that maybe we haven't seen Braden Frager play with the bounce, right? I think that's the low hanging fruit. So I'm going to try to go a little bit deeper than that. It feels like we haven't seen Nebraska as a team play with a consistent edge like we used to. And I don't know if it's as simply put, and this is just me being curious. I don't know if this is just simply put as if it's because of a couple of losses. Nebraska just might not have as much confidence that they're basically exuding from themselves game after game. I don't feel like it's that department, because I think if you ask some of these guys, there's a lot of belief in that locker room, and there should be. They're 22-3. They're 11-3 in the Big Ten Conference. There should be just a crazy amount of confidence oozing from this locker room right now for Nebraska basketball. I don't know what it is. It feels like over the course, when we talk about a consistent 40 minutes, sure, the easiest thing is like, are they hitting shots for 40 minutes? Are they able to defend for 40 minutes? I'm talking about like this edge that Nebraska played with, this like a relentless mentality from positions 1 through 5 on the floor. And even when Rink Mass is not in there, are we seeing Jared Garcia do that? And we haven't, right? Like tonight, I'm interested to see Leo Curtis not on the availability report. That gives us an idea. Remember against Michigan, Leo Curtis actually played some meaningful minutes when Nebraska needed him to. Mm-hmm. What's his role tonight against Iowa? Not that he can come in and necessarily give you that edge, but can he give you a post presence to where you're not getting destroyed on the boards as easily as before? There's a lot of things I'm looking forward to seeing tonight, but also I want to see Nebraska, and in a rivalry game, like you said, and with Braden Frager potentially leading the charge, let's get some of that edge back. Let's see some of that relentless motor from all guys, not just Sam Hoiberg.
Yeah, and I mean, Sam Hoiberg is going to be the smallest guy on the court. Leo Curtis would be the tallest. Iowa isn't a huge team, and that, Nick, might be a place where Nebraska can get its swagger back a little bit. That's the word that I would use, because where I think everyone else around the country was viewing Nebraska as, these cute little upstarts. Oh, that's fun. What a neat little story. Look at these guys just having so much fun playing together out there. I think Nebraska believed, and we heard it in the messaging, that they were that good. They saw it coming. They know what they can be when they play well. I think their edge comes from the little things. It's getting deflections and runouts. It's forcing shot clock violations. It's making teams go one and done. I think Nebraska will always need to focus on the glass, but with Iowa not being huge and not being an elite offensive rebounding team, Iowa's another one that'll get back in transition a lot. If Nebraska can force tough shots, make Iowa go one and done, that's the way. I was reading today, Nick, it's a few days delayed without the Purdue result and Northwestern results in there. But Jay Billis put out his Billis report. This would have been, I guess, updated today, but the Nebraska section wasn't updated at the very least. He has Nebraska as the number 10 team, in the country right now. And the final 2 sentences are this from Jay Billis. My only concern is confidence. Nebraska went undefeated for so long, and sometimes it can be difficult to refocus after a team sees its own blood for the first time. When I talk about and I think about Nebraska getting its swagger back, I think it would be a rink mass thing in a lot of ways. Can rink mass knock down, 3 threes on 5 or 6 attempts, have an efficient shooting night from range? Can Bear Cape provide some spark plays defensively? Sam Hoiberg setting the tone and making Bennett Sturtz's life difficult. Is Jamarcus hitting late in the clock? Is Price Sanford bombing away? Is Braden Frager, being that X factor like we talk about? Is Cale Jacobson doing all the little things? Garcia, Curtis, are they playing a role? It is so hard to get 5 guys clicking at one time sometimes, let alone 6 or 7 or 8 guys. Like, I think we want to see more depth from Nebraska in a lot of ways. But Nebraska's not walking around like the biggest, baddest dude on the block anymore. And some of that's to be expected. A bunch of these guys are winners to some degree in college, but not to this level. They're handling this level of success for the first time. They're handling this level of adversity for the first time, which is where I go back to. Tonight could be the perfect opportunity on the road in a rivalry game to go to your rival, shut that opposing fan base up, and be like, oh yeah, we don't just own the west side of the Missouri River, we own the east side of the Missouri River as well. It's not going to be easy, but as Jay Foreman would say, pain of discipline versus pain of regret. I have never questioned Nebraska's effort at all this year, right? I think they've, for the most part, always played hard, but Nebraska needs a result and needs a game where they can put it together for 35, 36 minutes at the very least, I think, to get that full confidence and swagger back that, oh yeah, this is who we are. Okay, we're locked back in. Like Fred Hoiberg would say, for a shooter, all it takes is seeing one go through the hoop. Well, Nebraska's seen layups go through the hoop, with Northwestern and Rutgers, for example. I would almost compare it more to baseball, right? You're in a bit of an extended slump, right? You're not swinging the bat poorly. You've lined out a couple times, hit a fly out to the warning track, hit a sharp ground ball right at the screws. But there have been other at bats where you're fooled. You're confused. You're swinging through a fastball. You're swinging over a breaking ball. You're reaching. Something's out of whack. I can't pinpoint what it is for Nebraska that can get them back on track exactly, but I think getting that winning feeling back in a game of this magnitude could go a long way in helping Nebraska rediscover that.
Yeah, last thing I'll say, I absolutely agree with you 100%, Austin. I think that, the last thing I'll mention and kind of leave with this on my accord is that if Nebraska is able to win comfortably, handily, this looks like a Rutgers matchup. This looks like a Northwestern on the road matchup. There's going to be a lot of excitement, I think, because once again, you look at what is around the corner, and even if you split the West Coast trip, or even if you, let's say hypothetically, you take 2 of 2 on the West Coast trip, you're talking about a 28-4, 29-3 type of ball club with a 17-3 or 16-4 Big Ten record. That is unprecedented, and it's good for us to be able to step back and really appreciate it. I feel like Nebraska fans and us as well have done a decent job of, while we're riding this emotional high of what this historical season has been, we've done a good job of not pumping the brakes, but just sitting back in our seat and still making sure our seatbelts are on. It's the matter of, you know what? This is also just sometimes what teams do. They start out incredibly hot. They go through a little bit of a lull. I'm not even going to call it a slump because Nebraska has just 3 losses.
To elite teams.
Yeah, right. To 3 ranked top 15 teams. They've gone through the lull, but now it's time to get back on the horse and go again, right? And tonight hopefully can be the kickstart for Nebraska.
I would use the stop and smell the roses analogy, right? Nebraska was on a walk on a perfect, 72-degree, 3-mile-an-hour breeze, barely a cloud in the sky sort of day. And it didn't start raining. It hasn't started raining at all for Nebraska. There's just some cloud cover now. And sometimes shade is nice. Sometimes you get a little worried. Oh, is it going to rain? I'm stuck out here without an umbrella or a rain jacket or anything. No, Nebraska fans, I think, still need to pump the brakes. Like you said, stop, smell the roses, appreciate the season for where it is and where it can still go. Last thing I'll point out, just kind of stylistically, before we turn the page to the recent series history for just a couple minutes, is Nebraska, we know, has had some issues at getting to the free throw line. Iowa has had some issues at keeping teams off the free throw line. Something to watch tonight, maybe some easy points in a slower game for Nebraska if they're committed to getting downhill. The other thing is Iowa hasn't gotten to the line much in Big Ten play. Nebraska is among the best teams in the country at not fouling teams. They're number three, in the conference right now in terms of opponent free throw rate allowed. That's really good. Iowa's 18th in the conference in terms of allowing free throws. And the flip side of that is Iowa's only 12th in the conference at getting to the free throw line against that number 3 team in the Big Ten at not doing that, in large part, Nick, because of how much they put on Bennett Sturz to create. There's some standing around going on, right? It's kind of Luka Doncic-esque at times from Bennett Sturz with what Nebraska or Iowa asks Bennett Sturz to do. And then, Nick, finally, the series history. Nebraska's only won 3 times in Carver Hawkeye. Nebraska lost both games in different forms of gut-wrenching fashion last year. The first loss kickstarted a 6-game losing streak. The final loss was the final loss of the regular season that kept Nebraska out of the Big Ten tournament and put Iowa in the Big Ten tournament. Iowa won in Carver Hawkeye in the one matchup that they played in 23-24, but then in 22-23, Nebraska ended up winning both matchups. Nick, I know there's not a whole bunch of carryover from last year's Nebraska team to this one, but guys like Sam Hoiberg, Cale Jacobson certainly ought to remember just how bad, even Braden Frager being on the bench for it, how bad it felt to have Iowa kickstart and then bookend the 2 losing streaks that kept you out of not just the NCAA tournament, but the Big Ten tournament. And I hope that's a driving factor, for Nebraska in a lot of ways tonight as they look to reclaim that edge.
100%. And I think, to talk about the taste that's left in your mouth, right? This is a senior class for a lot of these guys. Sam Hoiberg, most notably, last chance, or I should say last chance on the road against Iowa, right? Last chance on the road. You were able to win here a couple of years ago with Sam Griesel, that crew, right? But also this has been a year of being able to maybe get out from underneath all of the tough losses and the times where, frankly, you were just came up a little bit short on some situations. And it feels like as they've progressed through the year, and this is a team now that's won 6 road games, they can get their 7th here tonight, which seems crazy, right?
Keep adding to the school record.
Keep put another notch in that belt of why you are the best team to ever put on the Nebraska basketball uniform. You can do it tonight by beating the rival to the east. And when it's all said and done, if Nebraska wins tonight, Austin, we're going to have a fun time on the post-game show, because this could be a big one. And if they're able to do it in the way that we kind of broken down the last 28 minutes or so, then things can get really exciting for, once again, what the postseason could look like, which it's coming up quick. Only 6 games remain after this one.
The numbers tell you it ought to be a close game. We're expecting a good one tonight at Carver Hawkeye Arena, about an hour and a half away. Nick and I are headed over to the arena, only made possible in part by the great sponsor sending us this way. We're in Iowa City, but you're probably watching at home. You can turn your living room into the place to watch your favorite sports and your Huskers. From home theaters to outdoor entertainment spaces, Diode Technologies makes your vision a reality. You can visit diodetech.net or call 402-793-5124 for more information, as well as scissors and scotch. Nick looks good with his haircut. I'm wearing a hat for a reason. You can blend your old school barber feel with your favorite watering hole at Scissors and Scotch, just south of 30th and Yankee Hill Roads in Lincoln. That'll do it for us for now. We'll check back in a few hours after Nebraska and Iowa. Plenty more going on live on 93.7 The Ticket. We're headed over to Carver. We'll talk again soon.